What's up, guys? Steven Mosso here, and you are listening to Via the Source. Now, in today's video, we're going to be going over the Dolphins receiver group. You know, I do a Dolphins-focused podcast. I'm able to get some locker room interviews and some access to the players throughout the season. So if you want to go listen to more, you can go check that out on the Apple Podcast app or on Spotify. But in today's video, we're going to be going over the receiver group for the Dolphins. So we will begin with some of the players that opted out before we can even begin with who is going to be on the team in 2020. So to go over it real quick, we'll begin with Albert Wilson, who was terrific after the catch in 2018. And I really want to emphasize that, how good he was after the catch. So to put into perspective how good, in 2018, Albert Wilson had 26 catches and 335 yards after the catch before suffering a devastating hip injury. So 26 catches, 335 yards after the catch. That same season, Odell Beckham Jr., 77 catches, only 305 yards after the catch. Jarvis Landry, 81 catches, only 272. So Albert Wilson that year was really on pace for a historic level of yards after the catch. In week 6, at a game that I was actually at against the Bears, he put the team on his back. He had 155 yards and 2 touchdowns. And if you look at how he was able to get those numbers, the ball only traveled about 20 yards through the air. The rest of it was yards after the catch. Now, again, that was in the Adam Gase system that, if you remember, with Jarvis Landry, he was kind of fed the ball, given the opportunity to really thrive in these bubble screens and have these opportunities to make plays. And then in 2019, Chad O'Shea offense, it was a lot more chaotic. He was not given the same role as he was in 2018. So nonetheless, still a guy who will be missed, a guy who brings a potential for a home run play on every time he touches the ball. So he is going to be somebody who's going to be missed tremendously for the Dolphins. But a guy who is not going to be missed to the same extent but was expected to make the team was Allen Hurns, who last year suffered a horrific concussion against the Cowboys. And then in the year prior with the Cowboys, he had that horrible broken leg injury. So he has had some poor injury luck. He was never really able to return to his 2015 form where he had over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. But nonetheless, he was a reliable receiver, a veteran on this team that would have been, a valuable asset. Now, we'll dive into the guys who are very clearly going to be on the team. The first one is somebody that I feel is extremely underrated still, despite having a breakout year last year, and that is DeVante Parker. So to go over what he did in 2019, he had the 4th most receiving yards among wide receivers with 1,202, 4th most. He had the 3rd most touchdown catches among wide receivers with 9. He had the 3rd most catches of 20-plus yards, the 4th most catches of 40-plus yards, and then against Stephon Gilmore, Defensive Player of the Year, he had 7 catches and 119 yards. So I know what some people are thinking. This is a narrative that is pushed more nationally, and I think Dolphin fans are aware that this is not actually true, but a lot of people are saying that he was able to get this production because of garbage time, that the Dolphins were, quote, so bad that he was just raking up these yards, much like how Allen Hurns and Allen Robinson did with the Jaguars back in 2015. But that is not really the case, because DeVante Parker really shined towards the tail end of the season once Preston Williams went down. And if you look back, those are when the Dolphins were winning their games. They actually won 5 games. If you look at his splits, he actually had 533 yards and 4 touchdowns in games that they won, and there was only 5 of those. In the 11 losses, he had 669 yards and 5 touchdowns. So only 100 and some yards more and 1 touchdown in those 11 losses, but those were twice as many games. So this narrative that he was somehow just playing at a high level and raking up these points in garbage time is not true. And then I also saw this, not as much, but some saying that he was a product of the system and that he was given these opportunities to make plays. That is also not true. The guy was coming down with these tremendous, very contested catches almost on a weekly basis. He was just outmanning and dominating his defender. So I really think DeVante Parker's season was legitimate. People trying to shoot it down that for some reason it was garbage time or that it wasn't on him, that is not correct. What he did last year was all attributed to the work he put in. I think he deserves all the praise, and he still, to this day, I think is very underrated. If he can stay healthy, he is a viable wide receiver 1 for the Dolphins. Now, one reason that I could see his numbers going down is not a testament to him and how he plays or his skill set, diminishing or anything like that, but it's the return of Preston Williams, who was putting up the wide receiver 1 numbers for the Dolphins before he went down with an injury. And I will say, I have no idea why the Dolphins elect to have a 6'5" guy who could be a potential wide receiver 1 for the team out there on punt returns. I think if you extended Jakeem Grant as your special team specialist, you should have him out there. And if you don't trust his ability to field a punt, then why did you extend him? But now with him on the team, with Malcolm Perry potentially being on the team, I think there is no reason that the Dolphins have Preston Williams out there returning punts, or at least I hope not. Now, to get back, I do expect DeVante Parker's numbers to potentially go down because Preston Williams was that good. He had 3 touchdowns last season. He missed half the year because of a torn ACL on that punt return, and he was on pace to have over 800 yards. So his issue last season was with drops, but even then, either it was him or DeVante Parker, who it seemed like once a game were coming down with these highlight reel catches. They are both big, just guys you can have on your boundary. Preston Williams is 6'5". Like I said, his ability to make these highlight reel catches is there. He's able to beat out his defender on these jump ball opportunities. So I do think the combination of him and DeVante Parker is a pretty scary tandem to have out there in Miami, and I do think they are a very underrated group. Now, with Albert Wilson opting out and Allen Hurns, this is kind of forcing other players to step up, and one of those guys is going to be Jakeem Grant, who I mentioned earlier as a special team specialist. He, to this point, has never truly been able to convert as this offensive threat. Despite what we know he's able to do, he is as fast as they come, potentially the fastest in the NFL. He is able to make guys miss, home run opportunity every time he touches the ball. It is very interesting to see how the Dolphins could use him just because that skill set is so rare to have. And I do want to say that when he's out there on the field as a receiver, he does have these flashes where he is able to create this separation and just bounce away from his defender, and all of a sudden he is feet away from him. And I think that is very interesting. He says all off season he has been working towards truly becoming a receiver and being more than a kick returner. So I'm not going to bet against him. He is definitely a smaller receiver, but with the NFL kind of trending more towards, speed and less of being physical, I do think this opens up the opportunity for guys like Jakeem Grant, for guys like Tyreek Hill and Brandon Cooks to kind of convert to these offensive threats, as we've seen with the 2 other guys. I do think Jakeem Grant should at least have a decent opportunity to show what he has. Whether he does it or not is going to be up to him. Now we move on to Isaiah Ford, who, if you're a Dolphins fan, you are very aware of who this is because it seems like every offseason, every training camp, every preseason, he is hyped up to a tremendous level. And then when the regular season comes along, he either doesn't make the team because of an injury or there are other options that the Dolphins turn to. But this year, Isaiah Ford looks like a sure shot to make the team, which is awesome to hear. And there's a quote that Ryan Fitzpatrick said about Isaiah Ford last year that I really want to say because I do think it is an awesome quote. Fitzpatrick said, and I quote, "He's a guy that we have so much faith in as quarterbacks because whenever anybody has a question, sometimes when coaches have questions, we'll go back to Isaiah and say, hey, what's the signal? What is this route? And he knows everything," close quote. So being able to speak with Isaiah Ford, that is something that you can tell instantly. He has a very high football IQ. He is a very smart guy. He's able to communicate well with his teammates, and he is an awesome tool to have on the team. And it has led to some of the coaches saying that they could see him being a coach in the future because he knows the game so well. And last year, even though he wasn't, having a breakout season by any means, when he was on the field, he was a very reliable asset. He had 244 yards. He didn't have a touchdown. He came close on one play. But as I mentioned before, he was reliable in his game against the Jets last season. He had 59 yards and he had 6 catches. He looked pretty good. So Isaiah Ford right now looks like he is going to be making the team. Now the next guy here is already a fan favorite. He was a quarterback in college for Navy. Then he was listed as a running back when he was drafted by the Dolphins. Dolphins, but now he is primarily going to be used as a slot receiver, and that is Malcolm Perry. And I do want to say Josh Houts, who, if you know him on Twitter, at Houts, he has already had a tremendous nickname for the guy. He calls him the Swiss Navy knife, and I think that is amazing. So the guy can do it all, and when he was with Navy, he was primarily a rusher. He had only 1,000 yards or so passing the ball, but last year he had 2,000 yards rushing and 21 touchdowns on the ground. The guy was absolutely electric. He can make guys miss. He is shifty. He is hard to get down on the ground. And maybe more importantly, the coaches love him because of his work ethic and how hardworking he is and how open-minded he is to playing everywhere on the field. He is just a very versatile asset to have on any sort of team. So that has already led to him being compared to Julian Edelman, because Edelman, was drafted in the 7th round by the Patriots. He was initially a quarterback for Kent State, kind of a similar situation here to Malcolm Perry, who was drafted in the 6th round. So a lot of people are kind of making these comparisons, both smaller guys, both guys who are going to be playing in the slot. So Malcolm Perry, again, already a fan favorite here. He is doing amazing so far in training camp, coming down with these big plays. So I am very excited to see what he can do for the team, and I'm hoping he is somebody who is around here for the long haul. Now, to get to the last little spot we have for the receivers here, this next guy is primarily a special team specialist, and that is Mack Hollins. He is the biggest, heaviest receiver on the roster right now for the Dolphins at 240 pounds. He is a big guy. He is rocking this big afro right now. He is able to come down with these big 50-50 catches, as he showed with the Eagles, but even then, primarily a special teams guy, to the extent that they said he could even be an emergency long snapper for the team if need be. But with that being said, I don't expect him to be used on offense that much, and I do see him more as somebody who will contribute on special teams. But even then, Brian Flores definitely values the players who are versatile, who can contribute in multiple ways on the team, so that could lead to him being on this team when the season comes around. Now, of course, I was exporting the video, and then the Dolphins go out and make a move to bring in another wide receiver. So they traded a 4th round pick to acquire Lynn Bowden Jr. from the Las Vegas Raiders, who will now be added to this group of receivers here. That may sound a little bit odd because he was drafted just a few months ago in this last draft in the 3rd round, and the Raiders are electing to trade him for a 4th round pick. So to get into Bowden Jr. as a player, now he played a bit of quarterback last season after a few of the quarterbacks went down for Kentucky. He took over the role, and boy did he do a good job at it. Now, passing the ball, he wasn't terrific. He had a 47.3 completion percentage. He only had 403 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. But when the ball is in his hands, he is absolutely terrific as a runner. He had 1,468 yards rushing, 7.9 yards per carry, 13 touchdowns, an additional 348 yards receiving, and another touchdown there. So you can see why fans are already so excited with this Lynn Bowden Jr. trade. The guy is an absolute magician once the ball is in his hands. It is very hard to get him on the ground. He has this just extremely high level of explosiveness, and his ability to make guys miss is off the charts. So the guy is absolutely dynamic. He is versatile. He is a perfect guy for this system. The Chan Gailey spread offense has been described so much as an offense where it's going to work by putting the ball in the playmakers' hands and allowing them to do stuff with it. So this is an awesome guy to bring into this spot here. You add him in there with Jakeem Grant, who could do amazing things, and Malcolm Perry, who is going to, looks like, take over that slot role. This is another guy that could be utilized as his home run threat, as somebody who could be involved in trick plays. I mentioned his versatility. This is a very interesting move, I think, that has a lot of upside and comes at a relatively cheap cost for the Dolphins. So guys, that is how I'm going to wrap it up. As I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, if you want to hear more news about the Dolphins and the NFL in general, you can check out my podcast that is at Via the Source on Spotify or the Apple Podcast app. If you want to follow me on Twitter, that is at Via the Source. That's where I tweet most of the news and the Zoom press conference quotes and things of that nature. And I also have a giveaway planned on that Twitter, so go check it out. Should be up pretty soon. And if you want to follow my personal Twitter, that is at Shady Steven. And it would mean a lot if you guys could either leave a review or on the Apple Podcast app, or a comment or something you would like for me to discuss in a future episode. I would be grateful and glad to discuss it in either a YouTube YouTube video or a podcast episode, however you prefer. But guys, that is how I'm going to wrap it up. Until next time, I'm Steven Masso, and this was Via the Source.